Good morning and welcome to Power 106 and JNN Jamaica News Network PowerTalk Live. We blend television and radio to give you the best of coverage on the issues of the day. It's a program where we get to the heart of things. I'm Ronald Thwaites and I'm joined by my co-host Raston Hammond of Real Business. Coming up on the program today, Howard Mitchell, the president of the private sector organization, joins us to talk about the state of crime, its effect on business, the impact of that travel advisory from the United States. And then at 11 o'clock, we're going to welcome the leader of the opposition, Dr. Peter Phillips. What is his position on the public sector wage issue and on crime, on the sustainability of the appreciation of the dollar? And as you know, there's been a terrible tragedy in his constituency with the death of 2 girls at the Walker's Place of Safety, and more. And after that, Professor Dennis Gale, Executive Chancellor of the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, they are hoping to extend tertiary credit, that's university credit, into the domain, the province of sixth form. There's much to learn. Stay tuned then to Power Talk Live. But it's time for the bottom line. Morning, Raston.
Morning, Ronnie. How are you doing?
Fine, thanks. You told us yesterday that the inflation figures, the most recent inflation figures, would have been disclosed yesterday.
Yes.
What's the story?
Well, for the calendar year ended 2017, the inflation rate was 5.2%. That is 305% higher than the inflation rate for the calendar year 2016. The rate in December itself was 0.6%, which was similar to the rate in November of the same year, which raises some questions because the money supply jumped by $15 billion in December. So it's difficult to see how the inflation rate in December would be the same as in November.
With all the money?
Yeah, with that
in circulation.
Expansion in the money supply. Right. Notwithstanding, the rate came out at 5.2%. The rate for the fiscal year to date is 4.2%, which tells us that at the end of March we'll be at 6%. It is therefore against this background that we are saying that it's difficult to see how you could start the public sector wage negotiations 50% below that at 3%. And
explain that for me, please, be just a little slower. If the rate for the fiscal year, that's from 1st of April 2017,
yes,
and which will end on the 30th of March,
yes,
31st of March 2018,
yes,
is 4.2%. That sounds good.
No, it's 4.2% up to December.
Up to December.
So it means
then why
that
do
we're
you
going to end up in March.
Is that a pattern that the last quarter is usually a higher inflation, or
when we look at the trend,
extrapolating?
and when we look at what is happening in terms of fuel prices, food prices, the major drivers of inflation, it tells you that we're going to end up somewhere in the region of 5.8 to 6% because we're moving at 0.52% per month.
Okay.
Right.
So all right. So that makes it clearer. Now that's the high. 5.5 close to 6 are the high points, yes, of the prediction for inflation.
Correct.
For the year.
Yes.
Okay. Now the public servants who are awaiting a revised offer from government,
yes,
after the cabinet retreat will be looking at those figures.
Certainly.
And saying
that we can't start below those figures because it means a further erosion of our purchasing power. So
let's work this through. It means then that coming out at 5.5% to 6% would if a grant of that nature were given to the public sector workers, yes, it would merely have them treading water.
Right.
That is, maintaining the purchasing power of the existing dollar. It would not be a wage increase.
No.
Okay. Right. And then remember that the wage negotiation is for 2 years,
yes,
although I wonder why only 2 years.
Right.
That's a normal cycle, isn't it?
Yes, that's a normal cycle.
Right, but would it be any advantage if that cycle were extended to 3 to 4 years?
Well, I mean, looking at the trend in relation to inflation at this particular point in time, it wouldn't be advantageous because what we're seeing, we do not believe, based on this trajectory, based on what we see happening in terms of fuel prices, we believe that the inflation rate for year 2 of this cycle will be more like 8%.
Year 2 being the year
18
to 19,
yeah,
the fiscal year.
Yeah.
Okay, so that just to keep even, you're saying the public sector needs a 6% this year.
Yes.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would need another 6 to 8% for next year,
yes,
just to maintain them where they are now.
Precisely.
And that doesn't take into account any possible increase,
right,
or any desired increase.
Right.
But then I have to ask you the question.
Yes.
Just suppose your projections, which are not pulled out of the air, they're based upon data.
Yes.
Just suppose it was 6% this year and 8% next year. Can the Jamaican economy afford that level of wage increase? And does it even matter to ask how close that would put the wage to GDP ratio target of 9%? It would clearly be bust, and bust for a long time.
No, I don't agree with that. Because when we look at the current numbers right now, the wage to GDP ratio is 10%, and we are growing at stall speed 0.3%. The primary objective of macroeconomic policy is to grow the economy. So if we're growing at 0.3% and the wage to GDP ratio is 10%, if we were only able to hit 1% or 1.5%, then that would not be a problem. Then with all the resources that we have in Jamaica, with all the members of the Growth Council, with all the persons in the Ministry of Growth and Job Creation, if you are telling the Jamaican people that growth is going to slip back from 0.6, 0.9 to minus 0.1 and 0.1, then what's the purpose of having all of these people?
Point taken, but
yeah,
at the same time, in terms of balancing the books,
right,
you have an imbalance.
The government is collecting more revenues than it budgeted for. As at the end of December, we were 6% above what we were.
Understood. But then what we would have to be doing is to be taking more from people in order to pay the higher wage bill, rather than depending upon a substantial and sustainable growth in the economy.
Well, if we made the assumption that the economy is not going to grow, then yes, we'll be taking more from people. But we can't make that assumption that we have a government and several persons responsible for economic growth, and then the economy is going to continue.
I take your point, but then you're a man of data.
Yes.
Recent history would not confirm that optimism on anybody's part, least of all you.
Well, what we're seeing, and that is why we need to allocate our resources to where the economy can grow. So we have been collecting more revenues than programmed for, and we are significantly ahead in terms of the money that we allocate to paying down the debt, which we call the primary surplus.
Which is good.
It can be good and bad, because it is pointless. Let us just bring it simply. If you have a household and you have an agreement with your banker to pay him $100 per week, and you end up paying the bankers $400 per week, then telling your children that you can't feed them and you can't send them to school, and then you're expecting them to perform, that's not good management.
No.
That's what we're doing right now.
Well, the question would have to be asked, why?
Yes, and what we're saying, we need an explanation as to why we're overpaying the IMF and overpaying the debt while not investing in capital to expand the agricultural sector.
Because you see, I'm anxious.
Yes.
Let us accept that at least the public sector would want to be, or ought to be, kept pace with inflation.
Yes.
And it is reasonable to say that after a pause of many years, there ought to be a real increase beyond that. Now, if you're saying that that can be paid for by not by growth in the economy, but by increased revenue, yes, collected, what it really means is that the people of Jamaica have to be, more has to be taken from their pockets.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the increase can be paid for by faster economic growth, because revenues are a function of economic growth. The faster you grow the economy, assuming that...
Well, you have to explain to me that one, please. Sorry to break you.
Right.
But if revenue is a factor of economic growth,
right,
how come we're collecting so much more revenue but having so little growth?
Simple. Well, the tax department, they have increased their collection mechanism. They have
sure. So what you're doing is not presuming higher growth and the normal influx of taxes, but rather digging deeper through all these appropriate taxation collection measures,
yes,
into people's pockets. That's no comfort.
No, and we are saying that the primary objective of a government, apart from national security, is to grow the economy. And we are saying that there are enough resources around to accelerate economic growth. For example, simply, agriculture declined for 3 consecutive quarters. If we got agriculture to grow for 3 consecutive quarters, then the economy would have been growing faster.
Oh, so let me understand then. You're saying that we could pay the additional wages that is deserved, required, demanded, on the projection that the economy is going to grow further next year and the year after?
Yes. We can't make the assumption that the economy is going to continue to stagnate.
What does the history tell us?
Yeah, but what we're saying, the reason for all this that we're doing is to break that history. When the Jamaica entered into that program with the International Monetary Fund in 2013, the analysis was done that we cannot continue to grow the economy at 0.8%. So the objective of that program...
And what has happened since?
The economy started to grow. We hit as high, we had 9 consecutive quarters of economic growth, reaching as high as 1%. What we're seeing now is a slipping back. It is not automatic that there's a slipping back. We're slipping back because of the pursuance of bad policies.
So we're premising all of these good prospects and the demands being made now on the basis that the policies are going to change, that the growth is going to accelerate.
Well, certainly.
Okay,
and
well...
Our international partners make the same assumption.
Surely we hope for it, but it would seem to me that any expenditure that in that direction would have to be buttressed by a considerable review of the policies that are going to in fact make it happen.
Well, certainly.
And we're not doing that.
Well, and that is a problem. So our international partners, they are not supporting us on the basis that the economy will continue to stagnate. They would withdraw their support if that was the assumption. The assumption is that we're going to...
Look, I accept the act of faith that everybody is to make, but the act of faith has to be connected with some very concrete tactics of implementation.
Yes, certainly.
And I'm anxious when we return from this break on the bottom line to discuss what prospects there are really for that. We need to be absolutely realistic, it seems to me. Otherwise, whatever increase is going to be given is going to be eroded by inflation, by devaluation, as it has happened so often in history. We're on the bottom line. Raston Hammond of Real Business joins us on PowerTalk Live. We soon come. So you're going to get the best commentary on economics and business climate in Jamaica. You're going to get it straight from the data and the analysis of Raston Hammond of Real Business. I'll ask the questions. So Raston, where were the major incidents of inflation increase for the calendar year?
Simple. Food and fuel. Food, gas, electricity, fuel.
Okay. Now, all right, so let's take them one by one then.
Right.
On food, what's happening with agricultural prices? I believe you were discussing this earlier today on Real Business.
Agricultural prices are climbing primarily because of the dislocation of the agricultural sector arising from the flood rains, the lack of support from the administration. We also saw international food prices climbing by 8.7%. So if we import the food, we get them at higher prices. And that complicates the situation with the domestic supply constraints. So
can I hold on there?
Yes.
This is important for our listeners and viewers to understand. International food prices over the period measured have increased, that's a year, 2017, have increased by over 8%.
Yes.
So those who feel that there is some kind of bound to be advantage of buying foreign are not necessarily. I need to interrogate the figures, because while there may be still economies, international food prices, food imports, in other words, are going up.
Right, and this is coming from the authority, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN, not just some fly-by-night agency.
Even with the appreciation of the dollar in the last quarter.
About a 3.7% increase.
In food prices,
yes.
Even with.
Yes.
So, well, all of these have to be put in the mix, you know. So, indeed, the reliance on local food, the incentive to revive agriculture, once again, unfortunately hit by the flood rains and the climate change eccentricities of the last couple of weeks, may well carry over into the first quarter of 2018.
Right. And that's one point. So we expect to hear something from the cabinet saying that they have looked at this problem and there are some concrete measures to deal with it. So this is a situation And one of the major factors behind the poor performance of the economy, the 3 consecutive quarters decline in the agricultural sector. So we can't make the assumption that an administration that is supposed to be responsible is not going to take measures to fix this problem.
No, we can't assume that, but nonetheless we can't assume that they will, and or that they know exactly. Many times government doesn't know what to do. That's fairly apparent, and therefore we have to call upon the best minds and be resolute in calling for those measures that are going to make a difference.
Precisely.
Protected agriculture, for example, now becomes an absolute priority.
Precisely.
Because nature-fed agriculture, whether it is for irrigation or protection against wind, and rain damage is no longer a basis on which you can confidently propose increased production.
We'll have to be smarter, climate smart agriculture.
Okay, so agriculture was one element of it, major element.
Yes.
And you said fuel?
Yeah.
Well, I just don't, I feel desperate because fuel is something we have no control over the prices, and they are going in an adverse direction.
Correct. So we have no control over prices, but we have control over the demand. So we need to see some demand side and supply side policies to deal with this real problem.
Explain.
Well, for example, we can't have ourselves in a situation where we spend $1.2 billion to buy fuel just for consumption purposes to get 0.3% GDP growth. It means that we'll have to use our fuel more efficiently.
Yeah, but how do we do that, you think?
It is expensive.
Because that would seem, in my mind, to mean that there would be some limitations, some rationing, what I thought, on domestic car consumption, and an emphasis on commercial use, use connected with production.
Precisely. So that comes now to macroeconomic policy and the private sector. So this is a holistic problem. This is not just a worker problem. So we can't say to the workers that because we are misallocating our resources and not generating enough economic growth, we won't be able to pay you. Because this is a serious matter in relation to the fuel that we bought for the first 10 months of last year. At today's prices, that will cost us $1.7 billion.
More?
Yeah.
$1.7 million more.
No, 400 million more.
400 million more to 1.7.
$1.7 billion. We cannot continue like that. So there must be policies coming out of cabinet, because I'm sure they must be listening and hearing what is happening internationally with these things. There must be policies to facilitate a better allocation of the country's resources so that we don't spend all of these scarce dollars just driving up and down the place.
Well, we're importing 8,000 to 10,000 new vehicles a month.
Precisely.
Okay. Now, if we go, okay, first, well, it is a question: can we continue to sustain that?
No.
The burden of foreign exchange, the problem of congestion, the ambush of bank credit.
Right.
All of these things. Yes. Okay. So if we can't do that, then we have to call upon our government, and indeed, it's a broader problem.
Yes.
There's a whole industry and a set of social expectations connected with that.
Precisely.
To say this has to change.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're going to be ending up having to find more $400 million per quarter, per half year,
Precisely.
in order to fuel
Right.
all of these excesses, these importation excesses.
Right.
Okay?
Yes.
Nobody's trying to take away anybody's car, so please don't misunderstand. But we're talking about the ineluctable facts of having to maintain the huge dependence on motor vehicle fuel that we're experiencing.
One discussions we had this morning with the Productivity Center is about encouraging more people to work from home to reduce the commuting and the congestion on the road. That's one of the things that we discussed at the Productivity Center, because they have been writing several articles about that.
You mean having regard to the universality of virtual mechanisms?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's good. It's fairly common now, much more common now in developed countries.
Precisely.
I don't know that it can work for us. I did meet someone over the weekend who runs a business, I think it's events planning, largely from her home.
Yes, yes.
And that would be the kind of example
Precisely.
that you were thinking of.
Right.
Okay, but there are some things that has limited purchase right now.
That's a partial solution, but at the macroeconomic policy level, there's no way we can continue to allocate our scarce resources the way we are doing them. and then expect an acceleration of economic growth.
And this gets very close to home, eh?
Yeah.
If you're going to buy expensive new cars for the Prime Minister's office, for example, and they're gas guzzlers,
right,
then you're not setting an example, precisely, are you? You may be, the optics may be right, and you may look very stush and comfortable, but in fact, you're setting a bad example, precisely, for those who are seeing, wow, can I be like that?
Precisely.
All right. When you're buying cars for the security forces,
yes,
or the transportation industry,
yes,
it seems to me you have to have similar
fuel
efficiencies and notions of prudence, huh?
Yes,
that are going to apply. That would also hopefully have some purchase in respect of the kinds of expenditures that we make on the inflow of motor vehicles,
precisely,
which I don't know that you're going to be able to prevent in the short run.
Right. So, I mean, those are fundamental changes.
Well, another fundamental aspect, if I could interpose, is the long-awaited and still incomplete national transport policy.
Yes.
Because
Mr. Henry saying that we'll get that sometime next month.
Yeah, but respectfully,
yeah,
with the crisis which your figures indicate is not a recent one.
Right.
And I think we need to pinch ourselves, all of us, that we should have been insisting on a national transportation policy and system, right, yes, long ago.
Right.
Because the situation, frankly, since 1974 has simply, yes, been getting worse and worse. I'm referring to the oil crisis which began in that, I think, in that year.
Right.
So this is going to involve some fairly significant shifts in lifestyle.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we cannot continue same old, same old. Similarly, the whole question of criminality, which is 6.8% of GDP. This holds the key. So apart from the need to quickly rehabilitate agriculture, there is also the need to quickly contain criminality if we are going to accelerate economic growth. This is 6.8% of GDP. So if we start with, say, for example, our most competitive sector, tourism, we're not getting what we need to get from tourism because of the lack of integration with the rest of the economy. This lack of integration, part of the problem is the whole thing about criminality.
Boy, my head is just galloping as you speak, because there is a connection between the revival of agriculture and the surcease of criminality.
Precisely.
Suppose you took, let me just dream with you, and not impractically either. Kingston and Spanish Town and Clarendon are three very difficult areas for obvious reasons, yes, in terms of criminality. The entire South St. Catherine and South Clarendon belt are places that we have spent billions in the past to irrigate.
Yes.
My last information was less than 20% of the land, the irrigable best soil land in that area, is being cultivated, right, is in any use. Suppose you were to organize some of the idle, feckless, crime-prone youth of Kingston, yes, Spanish Town, and Maypen towards the systematic production of food in those on those lands, yes, in those areas. Yes. Not impossible.
Make a big difference.
Make a big difference. Yes. You'll be contributing to the reduction of crime.
Precisely.
That's one element of, yes, a crime plan.
Yes.
You would be advancing agriculture, yes, and skills connected, yes, with it, yes, and you would be improving linkages, yes, with industries like tourism, yes, and manufacture.
Yes.
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 Okay.
And you'll be helping to contain inflation.
Yes.
Food production.
I thought of that.
Yes.
Okay. So therefore there are solutions.
Precisely.
Yes. And these are not pie in the sky solutions. These are not things that would mean that you had to break the budget.
No.
One of the issues that concerns me, I follow your argument about the increased revenue and money sources to better remunerate our public sector, yes, as we were speaking earlier.
Yes.
But the problem is that if you use the money for wages, however deserved, however necessary, yeah, what you're going to do, you're not going to be able to use it for capital expenditure.
Okay.
And you're not going to be able to improve the other elements, the infrastructural elements, okay, of your social services, okay, in health, education, and security, because you will have spent it already on remuneration.
Okay, let's look at that. The amount that the government is offering the workers is a 3%, is $5.4 billion.
Double that.
Double that, we're talking about $10.8 billion. the government was collecting at least 13, 14 billion more than budgeted for. The primary surplus that the IMF required was $37 billion. The government's target was $48 billion. The primary surplus accumulated was $65 billion.
So what you're saying, we can do both? We can do both, yes?
Yes.
We can do both?
Yes.
We can both increase the capital budget, spend the money to build the schools, improve the hospitals, upgrade the police stations and their mobility and their technology, and offer the public sector cohorts a decent wage increase.
Yes.
We have the money.
Yes.
And that money is not just a bump now. It is something that, presuming even modest economic growth, we can carry forward.
If you are doing that at 0.3%, you'd be in a better position to do that.
If you had 1.3, yeah.
1.5%, 1.6%. What we need to do is to get Mr. Leach and Mr. Clark and all of those people to do the work that they have been appointed to do properly.
Yeah, well, all right. Forgive my expression.
Well, if they can't do it, they should not be there then.
Yeah, and we mustn't, let me counsel myself, we mustn't damn ourselves with faint praise because of past lack of performance. Eh? Right. We must still call upon everyone who has a role to try and do better in order to achieve what you're outlining as being perfectly feasible.
Because if we're not going to do that, our international partners are supporting us on the basis that we're going to do that. They're not supporting us on the basis that we're going to stay where we are or to slip back. If we are not going to do that, that means that what we are doing here now is a waste of time.
So what you're saying is
all our people are going to school. It means that they're wasting their time if they're going to live in an economy that is going to continue to stagnate or to slip back.
But the bottom line is, you say there's enough resources properly utilized that can in fact achieve these ends.
Additionally. Yeah, additionally. Let's look at it. When Wysinco floated that issue for $6 billion, the offers that came in amounted to $18 billion.
Yes.
There are many public sector entities which are draining the government's resources now, that just privatizing a part of them, just a part, could bring significant amount of money to the public coffers, could make those institutions.
But that's a once-off though.
Yeah, I know. No,
but it would stop the drain.
Right. So one.
I follow.
So there's a once-off flow into the government's coffer, but it would stop the drain.
Yeah.
And it would make those organizations more profitable because it would lead to a change in the way those organizations are operating.
Next time we talk about this, we're going to be very granular and actually name them and make the proposals. This has been the bottom line on Power 106 and Jamaica News Network. This is PowerTalk Live. Now, the United States has issued a travel advisory warning citizens that there are certain areas that they shouldn't go to because of rampant crime in Jamaica and sections of Jamaica to avoid. And after the break, we'll be joined by President of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, the PSOJ, Howard Mitchell, as he and ourselves discuss the implications this has on the tourism sector and indeed on life in Jamaica. Soon come. To PowerTalk Live on Power 106 FM and Jamaica News Network, JNN. And we now are joined by President of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, the PSOJ, Howard Mitchell. Morning, Howard, and welcome.
Morning, sir.
And congratulations on accepting the role as in the PSOJ.
Yes.
The PSOJ has changed. It began in the era when Carlton Alexander and Anthony Johnson and many others felt that the private sector was under siege in Jamaica. That context has completely changed. Is it a trade union of entrepreneurs? Is it a lobby group, an advocacy group? What are your objectives for the PSOJ?
Various people have various names for it. I think we have to be clear that the private sector organization of Jamaica, in its origins, in its purpose, and what is seen as its deliverables, is a representative lobby group for the private sector, for business people. Mm-hmm. Having said that, there's an intersection where it has a civic and civil responsibility, and there are issues which are national in nature and which affect the interests of its members and which cause the need for a joining with right-thinking nationalist entities and people. And that is where I personally think the private sector organization of Jamaica is at this juncture. I don't know what it was, but that's where it is at this juncture.
Okay. So two things, Raston, help me with this. One, there is a facilitation and the improvement of the climate for business, okay, that a lobby group on behalf of business would undertake. But secondly, and connectedly, there's this broader nationalist ethos required. Yes. Now, so how do you propose to work that out? There's an initiative, for example, on crime that you have proposed and seem to be getting some support.
Well, I think that together with our executive and our membership council, we need to identify those issues. We need to make sure that those issues, to the extent that they serve our interests as well, but that those issues that we pick on to lobby on in this manner are national in nature, are beneficial to the nation in purpose. And in that context, I think our interest in the management of our security and our crime and our public order is one that not only benefits us, but if we are successful in drawing the attention of the wider population, of the leadership of our society, to the fact that we are in crisis, and that, you know, you may argue that we don't know anything about crime, or it's not our province, but the fact is we are as affected, we are as citizens, we are as affected as the other.
But this is it hard, because the PSOJ, let me be blunt, PSOJ is thought of by many people as being big man business. And now you seem to be taking a posture that says, no, this is not only who we are, and that even so there are concerns and considerations about national life which will affect us personally and also commercially.
It's difficult for any organization not to take on the color of its leadership from time to time, right? And I think that the mandate that I have is not to stay simply within the four corners of the idea of big man business, but to move with the times, because I think we all acknowledge in another arena, in fiscal reform and in the economy and building the economy, the big man alone can't do it. Right?
Well, hold on now.
And there are things I can do, not that I'm a big man, but there are things that I can do that the other person can't do, and things that the other person, and as Mother Teresa said, let us try and do it together.
Together. When the PSOJ was formed, I remember the mantra, free the private sector and watch Jamaica grow.
Free enterprise.
Free enterprise and watch Jamaica grow. It really hasn't happened, Howard Mitchell. Why?
Well, I'm not taking responsibility for it.
No, I'm asking you if you have an account of history. It hasn't happened
because we haven't freed Jamaica and watch enterprise grow. Oh. The fact is...
Haven't freed Jamaica,
the fact is,
watch enterprise.
The fact is that we are bound, we are tangled up in notions of the past. We are hidebound by the divisions that we ourselves have created. And we do not realize that in a globalized world where everybody is standing on their own feet, we have to stand together, because that's the only way we can do it. Yeah. So that there's a time for change. No, it hasn't worked that way. I mean, I can make an argument that maybe enterprise wasn't freed. But I am not as much of a historian as I used to be.
But others would contend that enterprise has been significantly freed since that slogan was created in 1976.
I have no doubt that progress has been made.
Liberalization, we have made significant progress. We have gotten international accolades for, so why are we not growing?
I have no doubt that some progress has been made, yes. But the fact is that one of the theses I have is that we are not there because we haven't distributed that freedom in a way that makes it as effective as it should be. And that is why one of my agenda items is to broaden the base of the PSOJ, to reduce the constraints and strictures to membership and the cost of membership.
Yes.
Okay? To try and make, we have to synchronize our efforts. We cannot say that fiscal reform must involve the MSME, right? But not private enterprise. It can't, So the government must free up the the restrictions on the small man, but private enterprise will keep the club.
Yes.
It don't work that.
Right.
It's going to be very disruptive to achieve those objectives.
Disruption is part of change.
Disruption is part of change. Yeah.
What we have to do, Ronnie, is make sure that we don't make our historical membership uneasy to the point where they can't function. Okay. But we have to show them that we cannot continue in this way, and we have to be plain spoken about it.
Okay, the current crime plan which the National Security Council has been called to implement, are you aware of that plan?
I'm sorry, sir, repeat that for me.
The current crime plan that the National Security Council has been called to implement, are you aware of that plan?
Oh, okay.
We were told that a plan was developed at the cabinet meeting which the National Security Council has been called
I'm not aware of that plan. I'm not aware of that plan. And I'm not saying that a plan doesn't exist.
Right. I'm
saying that our contention and our mission is broader than that.
Yes.
In that crime plans have been developed from my research in the public eye from before around 2001, 2003. Right? We have had various theories, we have had various operational exercises, the amount of acronyms is astounding, right? But the fact that it's more than a crime plan. What we need is a strategic approach to the public order, the maintenance of public order and discipline, and the reduction of crime in Jamaica that crosses the intersection of elections, that crosses partisan tribalist lines, and that is a consensus from the critical stakeholders. Okay.
So therefore what is happening now is contrary to what you are proposing?
Well, the government is within its rights to develop a crime plan. I mean, that's their job. But the point is...
So where's the consensus on the joint show?
Wow, good. No. So what we have done, we have mooted this idea, and we have been we've started speaking to the critical stakeholders. We've had conversations with the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition, certain elements of civil society. We are going to be approaching other elements. What we are doing now is a stakeholder survey and consultation with the idea that we would arrange and sponsor and initiate a crime summit, or rather a public order and crime summit, to look at the impediments that create these challenges, to try and assign accountability to persons to deliver freedom from these impediments, and to set up a monitoring mechanism going forward. We're not inventing anything. We're taking the EPOC template and trying to get people to buy off on it. And one of the sources of my amazement is that people will readily accept the fact that out of a critical situation came the Electoral Commission, that the energy crisis was solved by a consensus approach, that fiscal reform to an extent is okay. But when we talk about this, you hear people saying, oh, you want a coalition government? I don't want a coalition government. This is an issue. This is an issue that can be identified as critical to our entire nation, and which cannot be handled in the new normal tribalist way with 50% of the people trying to manage it.
Precisely. So that is precisely my point, not to belabor the point, because you have been talking about this for the past month, 2 or 3 weeks. But we heard on Monday that a plan has been developed and the Security Council has been called to implement the plan.
Well, you will hear this and hear that. But let me say this.
We never heard it from just hearing it. We heard it from the source.
Maybe there is a semantic issue. Maybe there's a semantic issue. Because what we want is not just a crime plan, but a strategic approach to the management of security. And the fact is that we are not experts in crime management. Right, so we would leave it to the operational side. We expect to hear of the crime plan, and we will have our opinion on it.
Do you think, before we take the break, that the kind of consensus that you speak of is possible within the highly divided, in my view, contrivedly divided political environment of the country?
That, sir, is a tough one. I have moments when I really don't want to get up on my bed and go to these meetings. Because even when we do have dialogue, sometimes the sincerity of the dialogue,
that's the point.
Disturbed. But that doesn't mean that we can't try, and that we must stop trying.
Well, That's a good note to take the break on. When we come back, I want to ask Howard Mitchell, to what extent does he and perhaps his colleagues think that Jamaica is buffeted by all kinds of exogenous forces, things that we can't really control, and which in fact are coulting our development? And how do we make plans? How do we, for example, allay the concerns, the fears of people from abroad regarding the safety of coming to Jamaica, the high percentage of imports which seems to underlie and undermine local production? How are we going to find our way out of that kind of environment? This is Power Talk Live, and we soon return. Thanks for being with us on Power Talk Live. This is Power 106 FM in Jamaica, and it's JNN, Jamaica News Network, combining radio and television to give you the best exposure to those salient facts that are going to affect your progress and the nation's prosperity. Howard Mitchell is the president of the private sector organization of Jamaica. Howard, it seems that everywhere we turn, Macajucos. We're trying something. We get 4 million tourists coming into Jamaica. And just when we think, oh boy, we're really making some progress there, we're not fooled by the $3 billion US that we're supposed to earn. We know that we're only getting about 15 or 20% of that retained. But then, boof, we get this travel advisory that hits us. Okay, it's been there before, but nonetheless, it's bound to have a negative impact. How does a small nation in the Caribbean, living in the underarm of the Americas, derivative in so many respects, import dependent, is there a kind of direction that we can hope for real progress, sustainable development?
Well, first of all, I'm here to tell you that life full of maca. Nobody I know can go through life without getting some joke. Secondly, globalization has failed in its promise. Its promise, if you recall, was that everybody would benefit. Well, it hasn't worked that way. It has created further marginalization. The rich nations have gotten richer and the poor nations have gotten poorer. In that context, in those circumstances, we have some international choices. The old days of alignment have shifted. But what we can do is find commonality of interests, common interests, and try and work with those people. And that's why I am unabashedly a supporter of some type of Caribbean unity.
Okay.
So it may not be CARICOM, it may not be present, but we can't give up on that. Secondly, we have to understand that the old paradigms that would serve us in the past, right? When we were more visibly under the thumb of our colonial masters, of setting up different divisions of quarrel, and that can't work again. We have to come together as a country. There will still be issues that we can find multitude of reasons to have disputes about, but there are some issues that we have to set aside and apply ourselves as a unified force to the solution of them. And that is where I think we have to, that's the only solution I can see to the problem.
But do you understand that the entire Westminster model of constitutional order has as its basic premise that institutionalizing division is the best way to maintain freedom and to advance democracy?
Yeah, and I understand that.
That's a big issue that would have to be confronted.
The bigger issue is if we don't confront it. Right? And I am saying, I understand that it is that Britannia rules forever, but not in these waters. Okay? And we must find our own way.
Yes.
It's time we grow up.
Yes.
Well, all of your discourse, your direction is about things that we have to do for ourselves rather than depend on other people to do for us. That itself is a huge psychological, emotional, and physical, operational change in this country, Howard Mitchell. This generation, is it not time that we have to look at the independence enterprise and say to ourselves, frankly, maybe quietly, so that others don't hear too clearly, has this really done what we wanted to do? Isn't it time that we make different arrangements?
Well, I have a tendency to have my mouth get me in trouble, but I'm going to do it again. Our leadership has failed us, right? First of all, since Norman Manley spoke about the cooperative societies and the need to build a middle class and values and made sacrifices to achieve that. Our leaders have abandoned that theory, right? And we have, when last you see a political party with a philosophy, right? Manifestos are produced 2 days before elections and distributed like confetti, right? So the first step towards dealing with those structures or the institutional, historical structures that we have is for us to find out who we are.
Yes.
And Ronnie, I'm not sure if that's the answer to your question, but I think that if we discover who we are, with all the faults and the warts and the blemishes, there are some good things about who we are. And we mustn't be ashamed of it.
No.
You know, but our self-respect, our national self-respect, and this is where the independence thing comes in, that I do not believe that Jamaica considers itself, respects itself.
Yes.
I don't think we have a true nationalism in this country. It only occurs when we go to World Cup,
yes,
right? Or when Bolt wins something. So we need to revisit that social construct, and that is where leadership comes in.
Which brings us to a fundamental point and something that you promised to give us part 2. When the exchange rate started to appreciate, you sent out something and you said that was only part 1. Now, let's now move to part 2. The trade deficit is now up by 24%, $706 million US more. The total imports for the first 10 months, $4.7 billion. Total exports, only $1 billion. Trade deficit, $3.63 billion. The money from tourism, $450 to $900 million. BPO, nobody knows what's net retention, but even if we gave it the benefit of the doubt, $400 million. The inflation rate, 5.2%, yet the exchange rate appreciates by 5.1%. How do we square that circle?
Well, when we sent out the communique first time, the intent of it was to indicate our pleasure at some aspects of management being manifested, management of the situation.
Right.
I must confess to some puzzlement now.
Okay.
Okay? Because if one of those statistics that you had quoted had been right, then maybe I would hold back a little bit. But the inflation rate of 5.4 is not right. And it is hurting, it is increasing marginalization, the poverty rate is increasing, and marginalization coupled with a certain uncertainty of direction, and with the breakdown in public order that we're seeing is not a good chemical concoction.
Where do we go from here? You've indicated the objectives of the PSOJ. You've extended your hands towards the development of medium, small, micro enterprises. We would want to add the regeneration of the agricultural sector. All of these things connected. This is going to require the kind of planning that the enterprises need to be engaged in. Already we have this morning Metro Siaga saying quite legitimately, look, if you're going to put a tax on sugary drinks, why don't you speak to us? It speaks to a new kind of colleaguery in the whole matter of Jamaican enterprise. Is that what you're proposing?
Okay. You touch on a lot of points here. And first of all, the agenda that the PSOJ has is ambitious and is trying for the rest of the year is, first of all, to sensitize us to the crime and security crisis. Secondly, to broaden the base and simplify some of the structures of the PSOJ in order to deliver more value to members. Thirdly, to deal with innovation in education, to try and focus on the digital technology that can quickly have a take-up among our young people, especially in marginal areas, who have that natural creativity. And we're trying to work on that project. And thirdly, to deal with when they establish a committee for gender and minority affairs, because all of the data shows that we are ignoring the larger proportion of our society that can contribute more. Now, as far as agriculture is concerned, those issues broadly affect agriculture. I'm a vice president of the JMA, and I think the JMA has come to the position that agriculture and semi-processing in agriculture is manufacture.
Yes.
It's manufacturing, and that's so obvious.
But,
I don't know.
So obvious, but so new and so very, very important. Eh?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And
Yes,
we
and
need
again,
Yes.
you pointed that out.
Yes.
we need to look at structures such as the JAS and see how we can blow them up from the base.
Precisely.
Right?
Yes.
How we can blow them up from the base.
You
I
can
love
take it
this
any
man.
way you want.
Yeah, no, that's very important. That's what we need.
Yeah.
And also, finally, that what we want to do in the private sector, there was a moment when we were in the room with the state and we were discussing, when the IMF, when the crisis, we were in the room, it was continued through the electoral intersection, and all of a sudden, the door closed, right? Well, we're not trying to kick down the door. Yeah. That's not our style. We're not. There was a quote from one of my colleagues that said they were going to insist on people coming to the crime summit and require them to do certain things. That is not, to my idea, part of the definition of consensus, right? But what we are saying, trying to say firmly and insistently, is that it's all of us in this little boat here.
Right.
All of us.
Jonathan Brown used to say the cooperation of all sectors of the society is needed. That was one of his constant refrains.
Where did we lose this? We better understand where the infection is so that we can prescribe the therapy or move towards it. Where and when did that happen? How can we prevent that taking place again? How can we avoid an apathy, which is not only true of political participation, but generally of involvement, care in the society? Howard Mitchell, what fuels your nationalist spirit while others are lining up at the embassy to go away?
All right, I've been sanctioned for this, but my head tough. I think we lost it at independence when we thought that what we were swapping was one massa for the other. Okay? That we're so comfortable with this arrangement where somebody take care of your life, right? Somebody come around every now and again and give you something, and somebody, the client-patron relationship running. That's what we all know about.
Yeah.
That has become exalted into a discipline.
Yes, that's true.
Okay? And that is what we have to focus on. How we change it, I don't have all the answers. I'm just realizing at this late stage of my life that I have to speak about it. Okay? And that I have to put back in, and this is what you're talking about now. I am a citizen of more than one country. I have access to citizenship in 3 countries if I wanted. Right? But this is my country. My roots are here. My grandfather on the father's side go back up to Kunu Pass. Yes. Why would I pick up myself? And the other thing is I have been fortunate enough to be able to sustain myself here. Right? And I must get up and go and live somewhere in Tampa and can't sleep at night because I still have relatives here who have issues. Yes. I still, you know, but so that it to me maybe again a simplification, Dr. Thwaites, but the roots of nationalism are not easy to describe scientifically, but they can be developed and built by leadership.
And people will be encouraged towards that sense hearing from you. Right. Refreshing conversation. We stand with you in the objectives that you have for your organization and your leadership this year. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
That was the president of the private sector organization of Jamaica, Howard Mitchell. After the break, we'll be joined by opposition leader, Dr. Peter Phillips, to look into the ongoing public sector negotiations, the opposition stance on the issue, and a lot of other things we need to ask him too. Listen up. Soon come back. Welcome back to Power Talk, live on Power 106 and JNN Jamaica News Network. We join radio and television to give you the kernel of what makes life possible, advantageous, prosperous in Jamaica, how we move Jamaica forward. And we welcome opposition leader Dr. Peter Phillips, a member of Parliament for East Central St. Andrew. We're going to discuss about issues in the public sector, crime, and generally his perspective on national affairs. Peter, morning, welcome.
Well, thank you very much.
I understand this is a difficult day for you in your constituency. There's been a tragedy.
Yes, a difficult day for the country too. You know, there was a fire early this morning after midnight at the Walker's place of safety. Two children tragically lost their lives, heroically and tragically, because they were trying to save their peers and got caught in the fire. The fact of the matter is that there are 34 children now displaced. But, you know, the positive aspect, if there is a positive aspect, is that the entire community has responded well. The CDA, Child Development Agency, they turned out late last night, early this morning. The church, a church in my constituency close by, opened their doors so the children could come in. Okay. Staff members injured themselves trying to save the children. And, you know, we are doing our bit. The Lions Club used to pitch in and help. I have urged them to open an account. My constituency organization has committed $250,000 to that account to try and help rebuild it. And I really want to urge corporate Jamaica, civic organizations, everybody, to do what they can do to assist in rebuilding the home. It can be salvaged.
It's a private home, isn't it?
The land is owned by the CDA. And the management is put in by the CDA. Lions Club pitches in and other.
I see, so it's really a composite.
It's a public-private partnership, which is really the only way to deal with this kind of need.
But then again, what are you saying to us amidst the tragedy? Here is every evidence before and since this event of a real generosity of spirit, the kind of thing that can make Jamaica really great. I'm contrasting this to the kind of narrowness of discourse, almost a kind of pusillanimity, terrible word, that we find, for example, in the present wage negotiations with the public sector. How do we really create a country that's going to delight in serving each other's needs rather than descending to very selfish, individual, sectoral needs?
I think there's a real challenge of leadership. I think that what we see on occasions like this and on many other occasions is that there is a great wellspring of goodness among the Jamaican people who will respond to the demands of survival. After all, it is this spirit, this vigor, this energy that has enabled us to survive some of the most inhumane systems of governance and economic arrangements known to mankind, and to have survived and come out of it with the toughness, the hardness, the competitiveness, the drive for excellence that we see in Usain Bolt, in our musicians, whether Jimmy Cliff or Bob Marley or any one of them in our athletes that we have. Now, what we really need to do is to translate this spirit into the everyday relationships which guide Jamaican life. What would it involve? It would involve, first of all, a willingness to listen to each other, a willingness to cooperate, a willingness to be creative and inventive in the search for solutions, which is the point that I have made repeatedly in relation to the wage negotiations. It is true that the country still is in the middle of a difficult economic reform program. It is true that we were in more difficult circumstances before. Yeah. In fact, when we started the current program of economic reform in 2012, the debt was much greater than we have now. In fact, a wage freeze was a condition that was placed on us in order to get an agreement to start the reform program with the International Monetary Fund. They said, before we will sign.
That's the people who we owe money to, represented by the IMF.
The IMF. Yes. They said, before we will give a program, you have to secure. We had an agreement with them that said at least 80%
yes, that's true.
of the public sector
I remember.
wage force needed to sign up. We got 98% signing up and said, we will do this, but we did it on the basis of an assurance that as things improved, we would not repeat the wage freeze and that we would have genuine negotiations within the envelope of available resources.
Have things improved, Dr. Peter Phillips, to fulfill that promise now? And is there merit in the argument that some put forward that the public sector workers should modulate their demands because they already benefited from the 1.5 tax threshold?
Well, the first point I would say is this. The things are not as severe as they were as far as the fiscal accounts are concerned. We were spending much more at the start on debt repayment. Our debt was close to 150% of GDP. We moved that debt down such that when we left office, it was about 120% of GDP. It's now 110% of GDP. So there are more resources. The primary surplus target was moved down. We negotiated that before we left. So there are more resources, and I dare say we negotiated an agreement for wage increases with the workers in 2015, which was more generous than what is being put on the table
right now.
Really?
Yes. Was more generous than what we're putting now.
The base number is now 6.
Right? So.
And inflation wasn't what it is now?
No. So that was what we had done. And I dare say we entered into real negotiations with them. It's negotiations like that are never easy, but they have to be entered into in good faith. They have to be entered into in a spirit of creativity,
respect,
to find the ways together to go to where you want to go. They have to be entered into with respect and with realism, because, and quite frankly, I think that from what I am hearing, public sector workers have been realistic. Yes, they started out with bargaining positions that they knew at the outset were untenable. But at the same time, they have been willing to put out positions that said, we can meet in the middle ground somewhere. All they were getting is a repetition of the 6% number. Right. What is on the table would leave them worse off in real terms than is the case now. Remember, too, that there has been a inflation rate of about 5% for the year.
5.2.
Right? And that they are now, the 3% for the year would leave them worse off. Yes. Plus, I believe we need to just face the fact that this talk, the inability, let me just say it plainly, because a lot of claptrap has been written by some people. Yeah. The inability of the government to put a real offer on the table is because they have worsened the fiscal situation with this 1.5 that they offered, which has resulted in a $31 billion tax package, which the very people that they said were to benefit have in fact had to pay those taxes. So there's no benefit there, and you're telling them that they must do it. You know, there are some simple facts of life that often are ignored. The Jamaican consumer today is paying more for oil bought at $50 a barrel than they were paying in 2015 when oil was $100 plus dollars US per barrel.
More for gas,
They're
more for
paying more
fuel.
for electricity
Electricity.
than they were paying at the time, all of which has been caused by this ill-considered 1.5 offer, which hasn't given anything. And the tax package is not covering the full cost of what they have had to do. So the fiscal situation is worse.
Yes.
If there had been more careful management, realistic management, an unwillingness to play a kind of crude political gambit with the fiscal accounts of the country, the workers would have been able to get more real benefit
Correct.
from what was available
Dr.
than
Peter
they're
Phillips,
going to be able to get now.
aren't you worried, though, that within all of this question about remuneration, justified, that the arc of productivity in this country, total factor productivity, of which labor productivity is a very significant part, is going in the wrong direction?
Well, there is need to address that, and there's a need to address the inefficiencies and inadequacies of the public sector organizations. But I think there's just a simple fact. The country was called upon and is being called upon to sacrifice in order to correct the misdeeds, if you will, of 4 decades
Yes.
of economic management, or errors, failings, whatever word you choose to use. The fact is that the workers who are really at the bottom of the economic ladder cannot be asked to bear the brunt of that sacrifice. Remember, when we entered the program, the workers were asked to take a wage freeze. Our creditors, bankers, mainly local institutions, were asked to take a haircut, a renegotiation of the debt. That was the debt exchange. They have, because of the improvements to the Jamaican economy, they have recovered their position.
Yes.
They have been able to find the upgrading of the debt. The yields on the debt have improved for many of them, and while they did sacrifice something, they are back in business and they have recovered lost positions.
Making record
the workers
profits.
cannot be asked, the workers whose wages are already inadequate cannot be asked to bear the brunt of the burden. And it's a task of government to find the solutions to these things. And those who write and said, we had a difficulty in 2013, how are you now, referring to me, making this demand for something better? Either have not read the history, have not read the economic situations, they ignore the promise that we made on behalf of the country to the workers that as the situation improved, we would give them real increases. And real increases mean increases above the inflation level.
Yeah.
When we come back on Power Talk Live with Opposition Leader Dr. Peter Phillips, we look at the issues of crime, we look at the issues of the principles and the values which are going to lead Jamaica's society forward. And what did he mean when he spoke about recovering from the errors and failings of 4 decades? Soon come. Talking economics, talking social reality with Dr. Peter Phillips, the leader of the opposition. Ranson Hammond and myself, this is Power Talk Live. Ranson, I missed something that you said softly before we finished, that in fact the one segment of the productive society is making record profits.
Yes.
Whereas
the workers are still being asked to sacrifice. The offer made to the workers between 2015 and 2017, 7%.
Mm-hmm.
Is above the offer that is being made at this particular point in time, 6%, despite the fact that the fiscal numbers have improved significantly. The debt to GDP is now down to 110.
Government is exceeding its fiscal
consistently.
They boast about exceeding the tax take.
Right.
They boast about exceeding the primary surplus targets, and yet the offer made to the workers is less.
than previous.
But there are many people listening to us, viewing us, who will say, so it's set. That is the nature of the society, the political economic construct that we live by. Dr. Peter Phillips, does the PNP espouse that? Is there a,
No,
is there a different principle that you want to put forward?
Absolutely. We have never been a society or a party that believes in a society that is premised on the basic inequality that you describe, that there is one group that must get better and better off, and another group that must get worse and worse off. The basic underpinning of the philosophy of the People's National Party has been equality and the expansion of opportunity for all the people. We are not saying that equality means the kind of blandness of, you know, of Maoist China, when everybody was dressed in one suit. There will be differences, and we believe also in enterprise and in people's opportunity to use their own creativity, earn a living, and some will do it better than some. But we believe that there is a basic responsibility on the part of those who govern to set the stage so that everybody can prosper. And where the government is an employer, it has to recognize its obligations to improving the stocks of those who have been historically disadvantaged.
What did you mean when you spoke earlier about correcting the errors and failings of 4 decades? Were you referring to economic policy? Were you referring to us living beyond our means? And what role did you and all of the political tendency that you lead have in all of that?
Well, I think that we have to recognize just a basic reality, that we ran up a debt, a public debt, over 40 years, which reached the point by the time we reached 2012 that we were unable to repay without extraordinary measures. I think we have to face the fact that our per capita income since 1972 thereabouts has not improved, and at the same time our debt has grown by multiples, tens of multiples. You know, there's an interesting fact that we just have to face. In 1967, I believe it was, Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore sent a mission to Jamaica to try and explore Jamaica's tremendous economic growth in the 50s and 60s. At that time, Jamaica had a per capita income marginally greater than Singapore. Today, Singapore's per capita income is 10 times Jamaica's.
We are stopped at 5,000 US.
And we are there at basically the same level that we were 40 years ago.
Who quoted the game? Why?
Well, I think in many respects it will take a lot of discussion and debate, but what I say, there is enough fault to go around for everyone. I think the key lesson for me is the inability of the society and the leadership of the society, and I include in that the political leadership, to find common cause around the fundamentals that are needed to reform our institutions and to ensure that they deliver what is needed by a modern society and a modern state in an increasingly competitive world. So, like when you talk about things like crime, when you talk about things like education, you know, there are 2 approaches to the tough decisions, fiscal decisions that have to be taken. You either do them in a way like Singapore, by thwarting free discussion, tilting the democratic practice in a way that doesn't permit opposition, doesn't permit dissent.
That's what Singapore has done.
That's what Singapore has done. Or you have to have the kind of polity that allows for common decisions to be taken. Society is under threat, and most visibly under threat of war, like it was the case in Britain in 1939 through World War II to 45, where they set up cross-party arrangements and found common cause. The society is under threat. We are not under military threat. But for a long time, we have failed to find the necessary consensus. Where we arrived at it, it has been short-lived. You remember the education consensus 2004. And it was agreed then that education should come out of the ambit of political competition. Mr. Patterson and Mr. Siaga were leading the two parties. There had been an education transformation commission that had been set up. They reported and they said we needed to find something like a huge amount of money, $13 billion, 15% of GDP over an extended period in order to deliver the first-rate education. That was 2004. By the time we came to 2007, education had again become centerpiece in the political campaigning of the moment. You know, similarly, we had the issue with crime. Efforts were made to develop a national security strategy. When I was Minister of Security, we had the thing, Peter Brady, Admiral Peter Brady had been asked to develop a national security strategy. It was upgraded subsequently when Peter Bunting was Minister of Security, and a common cause was developed. We had got two sets of studies, one about reforming the JDF, which went through, another about reforming the JCF. We brought an international group of experts on police force reform, drawn from the United States, Europe, South Africa, and elsewhere. They delivered a report. The European Union said they would help finance the reform effort.
What, Dr. Phillips?
It's gone.
Yeah, well, but
and we were told nonsense in the last campaign about if you vote for PNP, it is going to be a vote for crime to grow. Nothing has happened, and we have lost the possibility. Yeah.
Ralston Hammond keeps reminding us that crime is suffocating the country. 6.8% of GDP is being lost. Is the People's National Party prepared to reach out towards that common cause in respect of crime and other areas, the call for national consensus that Howard Mitchell and the private sector organization are fronting? What is your position?
Well, our position is simply this. We have urged the government, give us a plan around which we can coalesce.
But they don't have it,
well,
obviously.
But that's the responsibility. They have to get one. I am told that there were extensive discussions during the cabinet retreat,
yes,
and that the National Security Council was deliberating subsequent to those discussions. And so I'm expecting that a plan will come out. We are willing to cooperate, lend our support, lend our critique in a constructive way to any plan that is put on the table. Part of what makes it impossible to plan in detail, doing anything other than saying, well, we support anti-crime measures, is that to develop a serious response, you need to have access to the intelligence reports, to the budgetary specifics, to the details of international collaboration and all of that.
Were these offered? Would you share? Would you help to initiate?
And let me state it again. If a plan is forthcoming that would take account of all of these things, we'll be prepared to sit at the table and see what areas we could add our experience to improving or changing or anything. We love Jamaica. We want to see it move forward.
A listener is asking us to question you on the differences between appearances and reality, and particularly to concretize that in respect of the exchange rate. All of the indications are that Jamaica's trade deficit is increasing. The differential between our inflation rate and that of our trading partner is adverse, and yet our dollar is appreciating, although we're not growing. What's your assessment?
Well, I think that my understanding is that the movement that took place towards the end of last year, the movement, the depreciation that took place was driven in part by the bunching of a lot of payments in foreign exchange that had to be made. That those payments having been made, the extraordinary demand has relented, subsided, and that at the same time supply of dollars has been made greater by virtue of the fact that there have been changes to the way the Bank of Jamaica intervenes in the market, which has squeezed out some double counting of the demand that used to be there. That at the same time there have been changes to the surrender rules for a lot of the earners of foreign exchange who had to hand over resources to the Bank of Jamaica, and there have been some other changes to the reserve requirements that have affected the market in a way that has contributed to some of the depreciation. But, you know, I think that the good thing about it all is, quite frankly, that we have had movement up, movement down, because that would have squeezed out some of the speculative participation. There were people in the market that were just participating in the market in order to earn money on the one-way bet downwards. It is good for the country that that is now lessened. But because of the factors that you described, we're certain that there is going to be adjustments over time in keeping. So you have had a one-off adjustment as some of the market conditions have been made more transparent and visible. But over time, the balance of payments realities are going to cause adjustments. The productivity realities and the difference in the price movements in Jamaica as against price movements in our trading partners are going to have impact on the market. So I would expect the volatility to be less, but I think that there will be continued adjustments.
I'm going to beg to squeeze a final question. Dr. Peter Phillips, there's a sense in many of our people turned off on politics and national life that it's same old, the two political parties. What's special about the PNP? What's a message that your party, under your leadership, has to offer the Jamaican people, which is energizing and which is different?
Well, the first thing I would say is that over the past year, approximately 9 months, we have had some tremendous changes inside of the PNP. Where there has been a change of leadership at the level of the president, there has been a change of chairmanship, there has been a change of deputy chairman, there has been a change at the level of treasurer, changes in legal advisors, there has been a change of a shadow cabinet, and it has been done at the same time as we have consolidated the unity and togetherness and single-mindedness of the party. Next weekend, we are having a shadow cabinet retreat where we will be considering the reports of some of the policy commissions that we established on how to achieve greater equality in the distribution of land and housing, how to deal with the issue of educational renewal, how to deal with designing a new economy with opportunities for the small and medium and the young. And after that, what you will see is the statement of our policy positions in keeping with the philosophical restatement of the party's position, which has always been a party committed to equality, a party committed to expanding opportunity, particularly to the disadvantaged, and a party committed to extending the opportunities for enterprise to those who have been marginalized by our economy.
Dr. Peter Phillips, thank you so much for this. That's been Opposition Leader, Dr. Peter Phillips. After the break, we'll speak with the Executive Chancellor of the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, UCC, Professor Dennis Gale. PowerTalk Live. Soon come back. Welcome back to PowerTalk Live on JNN and Power 106. We are now joined by Executive Chancellor of the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, Dr. Dennis Gale. He is going to talk to us about new programs that could include tertiary credit, university studies, college education at sixth form level. Dr. Gale, morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. Ralston Hammond is with me.
Morning, Dr. Gale.
Good morning.
Dr. Gale, are sixth form students mature enough to be earning college credits? Don't they need more learning?
Yes, it's a nice innocent question, and the answer is that in many other countries we have found that dual enrollment to advanced placement works very well with students who are at or engaged in a sixth form level.
Yes. Are you going to take them out of the high schools, or are you thinking of introducing programs within the existing sixth forms in the schools which offer a level of maturity to the educational establishments which will be robbed if they are to be if it will take place elsewhere? What do you think?
Exactly. The programs will be in the high schools themselves, and will take full advantage of their environment.
So what is your university doing? You first have to explain to us, give us a little background on the University College of the Caribbean, and also how you intend to approach the existing educational construct with this endeavor, and what will be the benefits?
Okay, so the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean was formed in 2004 from a merger of two institutions, the Institute of Management Sciences and the Institute of Management and Production. And it started out with a focus on business programs, expanded into computer information systems, tourism and hospitality management, and more recently into areas such as law and health sciences, and into graduate programs. The university is recognized by the University College of Jamaica, which accredits our programs. And we also have international accreditation through ACIS, an association for international accreditation based in the UK. So to continue and to talk about the benefits of this program, let me start off by noting that if we look at the ratio, the secondary gross enrollment rate from the Economic and Social Survey here in Jamaica, we have a rate of about 97%. But then if we go to look at the tertiary gross enrollment rate, we have a rate of about 28%. So you can see right away there is a major gap, and this is at the growth level. So if you refine it, then we get to a rate of about 20% participation in tertiary education, which means that Jamaica is in a very low category within the Caribbean and within the world in terms of participation in tertiary education by the eligible age cohort, approximately 16 to 30 years old. And this in turn means that we are at a severe disadvantage in terms of our efforts to use our human capital for sustainable development. So this is a concept which we signed in the National Education Strategic Plan 2011 to 2020. The idea that we need to strengthen our human capital development in order to survive and grow. So what we have been doing is, as a university, is that we have been talking to high schools, such as principals, boards, about partnerships which involve clusters of 50 schools across 10 parishes, which would bring to these high schools our associate degrees as well as occupational degrees through the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. So the associate degrees that we are offering would be associate degrees in business administration, tourism and hospitality management, and management information systems, which are all degrees which are very, very relevant to Jamaica's development needs and to the career prospects of the students. And the concept is, by the time the students graduate from grade 13, by the time they leave grade 13, they should have an associate degree. And this is a concept promoted by the Honorable Minister of Education, and it's one to which we fully subscribe. So they would need to begin, of course. It's a two-year degree. So they would need to begin by the time they complete grade 11, so that they have the potential to pursue the 60 credit hours which would be required for these degree programs. And note that we are offering them options, academic associate degrees or occupational degrees. And they would also, once they finish their academic associate degree, have the potential to work, to take, for example, a law degree through our partnership with the University of London. And this is, or they would have the potential to go ahead into the baccalaureate degree program at UCC, or they could pursue work opportunities.
To what extent these programs are aligned with the skill sets that are needed to move a modern economy forward? Because a number of the areas that you're talking about, many people would say that we already have excess supplies in these areas, business administration and things like those.
Well, actually, I can tell you this, that many employers today find that they do not have enough in the way of qualified people in these areas. And so computer science, hospitality and tourism management, aspects of business administration, very, very much in demand. But I think one key thing that is worth stressing is that this program is one that would be linked with corporate Jamaica, in the sense that we would first encourage Jamaican companies to consider offering scholarships to these students. And secondly, we would encourage them to offer internships, so that while they're studying, they have the potential to gain experience in real-work environments and be in a situation where once they graduate, they'd have a leg up on the competition and the potential to be able to secure work at the company where they had an internship or another company. So that it's very much one which is integrated with Jamaica's development needs, okay, as documented or exemplified or expressed through the interests of employers.
Dr. Gale, this is very interesting. When we come back from the break, we need to know what would be the prerequisites for matriculating into this associate degree. Need to know some estimate of the costs. And is this going to take away from the universities that offer a baccalaureate, their first and second year students? And is that a proper rationalization of the education system? We're talking new opportunities in education with Professor Dennis Gale, Executive Chancellor of the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, on PowerTalk Live, and we soon come back. Thank you so much for being with us on PowerTalk Live this Tuesday and all the occasions when we hope it will be rebroadcast. Professor Dennis Gale is the Executive Chancellor of the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, and he's online telling us of some new educational opportunities, blending or providing a seamless progression from high school education, ending at grade 11, Professor Gale, into tertiary education, but within the context of the traditional sixth form operation. Professor Gale, what kind of prerequisites will be required of those who want to enter such a program?
Very well. Students will need the relevant CXC passes, typically 5 of them, and they will need to settle down to be able to settle down to 2 years of work at least, depending on whether they're taking this full-time or part-time. And this would lead them to their ASC degree, which would be focused.
ASC, that's an Associate of Science degree?
Yes.
Yes, that's the same kind of degree that's often offered at community colleges, eh?
Yes.
Okay. And then if they pursue that to completion, Professor Gale, then they would be cutting out 2 years of the normal baccalaureate BA, BSc program in your university or another.
Exactly, and they would in fact have they would have had general education courses, humanities, computer application, calculus, and statistics
as part of this.
As part of their Associate of Science degree, and so they'll be prepared for the upper division if they want to pursue their education. But as I was saying earlier, they would have options because they could go into the world of work. Yes. They could go into business for themselves. It's another thing that I should mention is that we have developed a summer academy, and we're integrating this with the offer where students who are interested during the summers could take introductory university courses as well as UCC. Normally it would be 2 courses, so 6 credit hours. And this would, they had banked these until they had matriculated. And so that was another avenue where they could prepare themselves to participate in baccalaureate programs.
You know, Raston, I really appreciate this.
On an advanced placement basis.
Yeah.
So we're in the business of trying to give students options based on partnerships.
Yes.
And first of all, a partnership with the Ministry of Education, and then partnerships with the schools themselves, the high school principals, the boards of these schools, and then with businesses.
Well, I think the important thing is is to move away from the very outdated academic year structure, which wastes 3-4 months of the year at all levels, when in fact other learning and continuing learning can take place. And that summer program is attractive. What is the support that you are expecting from the Ministry of Education, Professor Gale?
Well, at first...
are they going to pay for it?
We'd like the schools to be aware that we are developing a partnership of this kind. We would hope to be able to offer the occupational degree that I mentioned, the associate occupational degree, at many of these high schools with the blessing of the ministry. These degrees are, of course, developed by the Ministry of Education.
What is developed by the Ministry of Education?
The occupational degree.
Are you sure? I never knew that.
Well, this is the Ministry of Education is responsible for the provision of the occupational associate degree.
Really? Okay, well, but the important thing is that each of these programs, all of these programs, any of them, will have the accreditation of the University Council.
Yes, that's right. Can I say one more thing about these occupational degrees? In that they're developed to the Center of Occupational Studies at the ministry. So there actually is a center which is responsible for this. Now, all of these programs are being accredited, or the test of accreditation by the University Council of Jamaica. So the students can proceed in full confidence that we are supplying best practice, excellence, associated indeed bachelor and graduate degree programs.
What's the cost?
Okay. So it will cost approximately 150,000 per year. But, you know, the University Foundation, the UCC Foundation, is providing scholarships to students who participate in this program at 50% of the total cost. So when I mentioned 150,000, it is factored in. And we also are hoping that the ministry will...
No, I'm sorry, sir. Can I understand that again? Yeah, I'm trying to understand again. The 150,000 factors in a 50% contribution by the UCC Foundation?
Yes.
So that
what I was saying is that it's normally 300,000 a year, and it's a 2-year program.
Yes.
So we bring it down to 150,000 a year by virtue of a contribution from the UCC.
Okay, but that's more than 100% more than 100% additional to what a normal sixth form experience costs.
Well, it is not a secondary experience, the tertiary experience. This represents the first 2 years of a baccalaureate program. That would be the basic consideration.
Okay, and you speak of 50 schools, Professor Gale?
Yes, we are.
Have you chosen those schools?
We are looking to offer to work on the basis of a cluster composed of 50 schools across 10 parishes. So we'd have perhaps 5 schools in each cluster. We'd have cohorts of 25 to 30 students for each program. So, as I said, partnerships would be at the heart of this, and we are including partnerships for the high schools themselves.
What's the selection criteria?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
The selection criteria, on what basis the schools will be selected?
Okay. Simply, we are inviting the schools to take part in a launch ceremony next week, Thursday, the 25th of January. And as part of this, we are proposing this partnership to the schools. So the first criteria would be willingness to take part in this partnership and willingness to provide facilities for the associate degree program at these schools. What would be needed would be essentially properly filled classrooms and a small office for UCC staff who would be running the program in collaboration with qualified teachers, some from the high schools themselves.
Okay, and the teachers from the high schools would be chosen by the University of College of the Caribbean and of the Commonwealth Caribbean, and would be remunerated separately and beyond their normal duties?
That's right, yes. And they would be selected.
And paid for by the program?
Yes, there would be some program faculty.
But then many schools, Professor Gale, I'm just thinking of the logistics. To have a reputable degree in hospitality and management requires a fair amount of infrastructure, eh?
The practical degrees we're offering, as I mentioned, business administration, tourism, and hospitality management and management information systems.
Right.
We have the virtue that we don't require extensive infrastructure, just standard academic infrastructure. And the students will be...
I hope you're not going to dumb down the process, you know, Prof, because I would have thought that you needed university-level computer facilities, kitchens, labs, etc.
Now we're thinking about, it sounds like we're thinking about
We've lost Professor Dennis Gale just at that point, eh? I think it's a good idea.
Yes.
But we have a tension, Ralston, just to wind it up as our time is almost up on PowerTalk Live. We do apologize to Professor Gale, thank him for his input. But while we need to improve and extend the opportunities for tertiary education and have an absolute target to do so, 20% won't work, again, if we're going going to meet our economic objectives, we have to follow what Professor Denzel Williams has told us, is in fact a heavy investment in human resources and certification. We have to be extremely careful as to the quality of what we offer. And this is something that in our haste to improve, we should be mindful of.
Not sacrifice quality.
No, an international accreditation, not by some of the hurry-come-up accreditation boards, but rather by the top engagers in this field is most important. I am concerned, for example, of reports that I get from the business processing outsourcing industry that people with university degrees are coming who do not have the level of digital competence or command of written and spoken English in order to be able to be employed at entry level. And so it's important we talk this out, because with no aspersion cast on this program, which we thoroughly endorse, it is absolutely vital that we make sure that we are helping students to become the best that they can be, not halfway there.
Precisely, and then they are disappointed.
And then they're disappointed. Yes? This to me is extremely important.
Quality must be at the core.
Thank Professor Dennis Gale once again. Sorry that the telephone system played us some tricks at the end. And we're grateful to the Chancellor of the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean for telling us of this new associate degree program. Listen up for their launch next week on the 25th and learn more about it, particularly if you're a student looking for prospects beyond grade 11. This is where we end Power Talk Live for today. Special thanks to our guests, to my co-host Raston Hyman, and also to you, our listeners and viewers, on Power 106 and JNN. We thank also our editorial and production teams, and we invite you to join us again next time when we get to the heart of things and discuss those issues that affect you and the well-being of our country. Please remember that Power Talk continues on Power 106 after the midday break. Until next time, Ronald Thwaites and Raston Hyman signing out.
Living in the positive, and I know good will conquer evil. Living in the positive. Oh, children, let not your hearts be troubled. Wipe away your tears and fears, 'cause I know